When I pointed out the numeric repetition in the first episode of HBO's The Last of Us, my co-creator said I sounded like Jim Carrey in the number 23. She wasn't wrong, but neither was I. 3 and 4, and by extension 7, occur so frequently it's difficult to dismiss their appearance as mere coincidence. I'll only be covering some examples of 3s here. I'm sending you on a scavenger hunt. Find the 4s and leave them in the comments below. We can't talk about numbers without acknowledging the influence of Judeo-Christian mythology on Western literature and storytelling. The number 3 is biblically iconic and communicates a narrative idea through a referential lens, much like the conlang of cultural allusions in Star Trek Generations episode Darmok. 3 is littered throughout the New Testament in particular, and numbers divisible by 3. The Holy Trinity, the 3 apostles who accompany Jesus to the Garden of Gethsemane, the 3 hours of darkness that coincide with Christ's suffering, his death at 3 p.m., also known liturgically as the 9th hour or hour of noon, his resurrection on the 3rd day, the 3 women at the tomb to whom he first appears, and so on. In Revelation 16:13, 3 unclean spirits emerge from the mouths of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. Revelation 8, which concludes with the 3 woes and the trumpeting of 3 angels, catalogs the thirds of trees, seas, ships, rivers, waters, and stars that are destined to be destroyed. As we follow Sarah Miller, the character whose tragic demise will catalyze the narrative and call the protagonist to action, we begin to encounter numbers that are either specified in dialogue or the camera chooses to focus on. When she brings Joel's watch to the shop for repairs, the watchmaker says that it's 3:15. The wall behind Sarah is covered in analog clocks, which means all of their collective hands, hour and minute, are poised at the number 3. Sarah's neighbor says that 3 nails plus 1 cross equals 4 giveness, the sum of which is 9, or 3 squared. Sarah turns to channel 9 at 2:16 a.m., 2 plus 1 plus 6 being 9, while the world around her begins to burn. We'll later see 3 citizens on the gallows for violating Article 1, Section 5 in the military state of Fedra. 20 years after his daughter's death, Joel is still clinging to the past. We could easily infer this from his actions and interactions, but the camera zeroes in on the cinder blocks under his bed. Cement, the material with which he worked as contractor, supporting him as he, like the world that mirrors his inner state, destabilizes under a litany of losses. The broken wristwatch reiterates his numb stasis. When Ellie is made his charge and the responsibility of parenthood is thrust upon him once again, we see hope in the father-daughter dynamic that is yet to unfold between these 2 contrasted characters. We see it when Ellie peers out the window, a butterfly decal above her head, light shining tellingly on her face while Joel remains in darkness. The curtain above her, unlike its twin on the same wall, is still intact. Being a father is foundational to Joel's identity. He's cemented in the memory of Sarah, who the world tore away from him, leaving him in tatters. Protecting Ellie renews his selfhood while also bringing old trauma to the surface. The butterfly itself is a symbol of resurrection and rebirth, and the sunlight bathing her face in a warm red glow tells us everything we need to know. We needn't have played the game to understand that Ellie is his salvation. Moreover, the slogan that repeats in graffiti on the walls of the dystopian city reads, "When you're lost in the darkness, look for the light." Perhaps my favorite line of dialogue in this episode is, "Someone else will come along." From a monomythic perspective, those are the penultimate famous last words, the resistance of the call that is quintessential to a hero, particularly a reluctant hero, a chosen one that would have you choose again. But its later repetition, when Joel attempts to refuse Ellie as his charge, is part in a larger thematic trend that underscores his character, beginning with a watch that he'd never get around to repairing himself, according to Sarah, and connecting back to the post-crisis cinder blocks, broken watch, torn curtain, and his face, in contrast with Ellie's, filmed in shadow. Joel's great conflict is not the plague or its subsequent perils, but his own metaphorical paralysis as 20 years of unfeeling survival leave him fossilized, perfectly preserved in trauma, like the infected corpse he and Tess discover moldering in the walls. The challenge the world faces is to simply move under the crushing weight of a global disaster. His challenge as a hero is to find the will to move on. Episode 2 is largely a reiteration of, and expansion on, the themes and symbols in Episode 1, but not a wasted one by any means. This is a veritable primer on subtext, beginning with the post-intro scene and the return of the butterfly. It opens with a peacefully slumbering Ellie, curled in the fetal position on a circle of greenery, light bathing her sleeping form, a butterfly wafting over her. The camera zooms out to reveal dark, dystopian surroundings. She's in the center of a room that is otherwise shadowy and composed of rubble, under a broken roof with sunshine beaming down on her, like the oculus of a cathedral. Below the opening in the ceiling is a halo of twine and wire, suggestive of a crown of thorns. Her mossy bed is like a stage on which a limelight is beating. Joel and Tess are sitting outside this isolated patch of nature in shadow, framed by the colorless walls of their shelter, watching over her. There is a stark juxtaposition between the agrarian setting in which Ellie is enshrined with springtime insinuations of innocence and renewal, and the industrial setting in which Joel and Tess are seated, remnant of an urban wasteland. Neither Joel nor Tess enter this sphere of light, though Tess nears it, her face half in sun, half in shadow, when she kneels before Ellie, as an adult to a child, or a saint to a savior, to explain to her that she and Joel aren't good people. But the visual subtext would suggest otherwise. Tess' depiction in the scene almost reads as a conversion, contrasted with Joel's ongoing doubts. When Ellie first wakes, Joel demands to see the arm that bears the bite of the infected, to prove she, however impossibly, is immune. This mirrors John 20:25 when Thomas, one of the 12 disciples, says, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Fittingly, Joel remains in darkness throughout this scene, continuing to resist the call, both the monomythic call to adventure and the spiritual call that the mission represents, the call to save humanity. His line of "better them than us" echoes his earlier line in episode 1 of "someone else will come along." Adding to the growing cachet of grave one-liners, "we lose. Bombs." Is Tess' seemingly simple but loaded question to Joel when she sees his hand shake as he grips his firearm, having steeled himself to do to Ellie what a soldier did to Sarah. Broken? Joel protests the hope of a miracle cure, saying, "We've heard this a million times. This isn't going to end well. We need to go back." But Tess convinces him to move forward with their plans. Joel proceeds to shift a large shelf, a makeshift blockade, away from the door, very likely alluding to the stone being rolled away from Christ's tomb, allowing light to flood in. The messianic imagery comes full circle at the episode's close when Tess, having been bitten, sacrifices herself, instructing Joel to save who you can save. All this time he's been resisting. It's over. But she tells him that this is real, that others will believe despite his insistence that they won't, that they will because you'll convince them. The call of the apostle issued from the mouth of the martyr. Notably, it's not just the salvation of humanity with which Tess is concerned in her final moments, but hers and Joel's redemption when she says, "And you set everything right." As Joel drags Ellie away, leaving Tess to intercept the infected, she's backlit by the sun beaming through 3 panes in the window behind her, framed by an arch, casting a long shadow down the hall like some foreboding ethereal guardian, the very effigy of a patron saint.